It's time for Top Story on AM 1480 WLEA Hornell. Here's Ryan O'Neill.
Well, this week's top story, and we're sorry to have to report this, a U.S. Army Major Patrick Miller from the Cattaraugus County town of Allegheny was injured in the Fort Hood shooting. The Buffalo News reported that he was hit with a bullet in the abdomen. He's expected to survive. His mother said he's making a good recovery and is expected to continue in that way. There was another big anti-SAFE Act rally. Rob Astorino, Carl Palladino, and Donald Trump were all there for that. It turns out that Trump, by the way, won't be buying the Buffalo Bills. There had been some speculation on that. Trump says it's not going to happen for a number of reasons. Melissa Ullman from the Steuben County Treasurer's Office pleaded guilty to doctoring computer records. District Attorney Brooks Baker says that's so she could steal. WETM reported it was over $20,000 stolen. Democrat Martha Robertson, who's running for Congress, came out against the Paul Ryan budget. Also in the news, a Cohocton resident facing welfare fraud charges $22,000 worth. Common Core testing for English language arts, that was taken by students across the state. Well, some of them, the numbers we heard, something like 30,000 statewide refused to take the ELA test for Common Core. Republican candidate Rob Astorino announced he pulled his kids out of that testing. To talk about some of these issues and others, State Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. Assemblyman, thanks for coming on.
Oh, it's good to be with you again, Brian.
Assemblyman, a soldier from the town of Allegheny, as you know, that's just outside of Olean. He was one of the soldiers injured when the shooting happened at Fort Hood this week. He's a Bonaventure graduate. Wondering, through your connections and contacts, have you heard anything about the condition of Major Patrick Miller?
No, I have not, but certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family during this time. When you see things like this happen, it just certainly makes you pause and appreciate the days we have, and you just never know when something like this is going to happen. So certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to Major Miller and his family.
Assemblyman, if we could talk about Common Core tests, did you hear any complaints this week or the time leading up to this week about the Common Core English language arts tests?
Yeah, I mean, we've continually heard concerns relative to the Common Core and the testing that was taking place. I know a number of parents have adopted their children out of taking the tests here in the region and also across the state. It's a concern that's continued to be raised with the exhaustive testing and its implications.
Now, Republican Rob Astorino, who's the GOP's candidate for governor, he said this about his own children missing the Common Core English Language Arts test on the Susan Arbetter Capitol Press Room show on National Public Radio this week.
It was one that we both agreed. I said, what do you think if the kids don't take the test? She said, there's no reason why they have to. It has no consequences whatsoever on our children. We wouldn't put the children in that position if they did.
That's Astorino talking about a conversation he had back and forth with his wife about pulling the kids from those tests. Assemblyman Palmesano, is this the kind of conversation you've heard before, a familiar conversation between parents?
Oh, I mean, yes. I mean, for the last few months, parents have been talking about opting out of this test. That's just one of the issues. I mean, we've continually heard about the concerns relative to Common Core, particularly around the testing, and and that's why there's been such while we've continued to call for a moratorium or a delay to slow this process down, to reevaluate Common Core, and to deal with this exhaustive testing. And even although the budget did have some provisions that reformed some of the Common Core practices, in my opinion, didn't go far enough as far as dealing with a pause or delay in it, and to stop the testing that continues to go on. I think those are some things that really need to be addressed relative to this, and that's something that's going to continue to be discussed as we move forward.
By the way, before we go any farther with this part of the interview, I'd like to say I got a complaint to our news department from a local educator who said that we're too hostile to Common Core. I said, and this person was a local educator and was very much for Common Core, and I said to this person, whose name I won't say, if you would like to come on, the microphone is all yours. I'd love to have you on anytime. There was an open invitation. That person has never chosen to come on. Most of the people who do contact me are anti-Common Core, so I've been accused of bias on this topic, but I'll tell you, the people that are for Common Core don't come to me. Assemblyman Palmesano, continue our sound bites here from Rob Astorino. This is Astorino on the uncertainty of the future of Common Core.
It's never been tested before, and we'll get our answer in 10 years. What if this is a massive failure? It's not just the implementation. When the implementation is fixed, you're still left with a system that may not work.
Okay, Assemblyman Palmesano, your thoughts on what Astorino said there about Common Core. Is it untried and untested, as he says?
Well, it is, and I think Mr. Astorino is actually sounds like he's been listening to the parents and the teachers and the students and the administrators from across the state who raised a number of concerns relative to this. I think it's something that needs to continue to be sorted out because this thing was not really tested. It was adopted without any type of a review. I would rather see this thing. Let's pause. Let's slow down. Let's review it. Let's have experts review it from the educational field, from special education and from education in and of itself, and let's review this thing and especially pause on this testing because whether for the kids, the pressure on the kids and the teachers because it's tied to their evaluations, and now we're saying it's not going to affect the kids' promotion, but yet it still affects the teachers. There's just a lot of still I think a lot of unanswered questions, and that's why I just think I've been one of the ones calling, and a number of people, let's pause and hit the brakes on this thing. Let's reevaluate it. Let's let people look at this. But this issue is not going to go away, Brian. The parents, in Corning, we had over 300 people show up, and 40 people testified. The parents of this state are speaking very loud and clear that they want the brakes paused and hit on this thing, and let's reevaluate it. But unfortunately, if we keep tinkering around the edges, we're not going to make the changes that are necessary. Listen, we're all for higher standards, and I know when you hear people talk about Common Core, the proponents are talking about the standards. And listen, we can all have higher standards, and let's work on that. But the way this thing has been working and how it's moving forward, there's a lot of questions on whether that's really getting us there, and that's why we've called for a pause or delay in this issue.
Assemblyman, moving on to a different topic here. Talk 1300 announcer, New York Post writer Fred Dicker, did a segment on his show this past week about how unfriendly government can be to businesses and stores in New York State. Here in this clip, Dicker tells a story about an antique collector in his area, the Albany area, who was allegedly on the receiving end of an arrest, unnecessarily in Dicker's view.
They were there on, I think, a Friday or a Thursday, the DEC officers. And I've called the Department of Environmental Conservation to ask them about this. They haven't gotten back to me yet. They show up. They know he's in violation of this little-known law. There's no requirements for the permit. It doesn't cost you anything. He just didn't have it. They don't tell him that he doesn't have the permit. After the auction and he sells the antique fan, or there may have been two fans, he's arrested on a criminal charge, which then involves months of legal wrangling. In the end, he gets a settlement where he said his company pleads guilty to a crime as opposed to he himself, and he has to pay a $10,000 fine for not having a permit that doesn't cost anything.
Now, Dicker continues with his story about the antique collector being harassed.
Now, when those two officers, assuming the story is accurate, and I think Russ Carlson is an honorable person and is telling the truth, when those two officers showed up on a Friday or a Thursday for the preview, why didn't they tell Russ Carlson or ask him, do you have a permit? They probably had already checked their registry to see if he was listed. They must have known it, that he didn't. They could have said, do you have a permit? Oh, you don't? Well, then you can't sell this. You got to get yourself a permit. Give them a heads up. Why didn't the tax department over the years notify auctioneers that they have to have a certain permit? Bob Marangelo, the auctioneer and dealer, he told me he didn't know about it either. And apparently other dealers haven't known about it. A $10,000 fine against a legitimate business acting in good faith.
Assemblyman Palmesano, I know you're very close to a lot of people in the DEC, and that's not common. I don't hear about stuff about the DEC like that around here, but I was kind of curious. Your thoughts, with the governor going around promoting businesses open in New York State, New York is open for business, and all the commercials nationwide. Your thoughts on that kind of news that Dicker just spoke of there about the antique collector being harassed?
Well, Brian, it's very, very disturbing. And I've said this over and over again. You can run all the TV commercials you want saying you're open for business, but businesses don't look at what we say. they look at what we do. And if you have agents of the government, no matter what department it is, that continues to work in an unfriendly way, it looks like this is people looking to justify their, government job. And we need to be more business friendly, not just in our policies, but in our regulations and in the enforcement. I mean, I think businesses, we should be helping our businesses to address issues and problems because there's so much red tape, there's so many regulations, and most of our business owners, especially our small business owners, if you talk to anyone, whether it's there in Hornell on Main Street or anywhere across the county and region, they spend probably more time doing paperwork and complying with burdensome regulations that does nothing to help them grow their business or create jobs, which is what we need to turn this economy around so we can truly be open for business. I wish this was like an isolated story, but I've heard so many stories like this over the years, both as a member and as a longtime staff person. And until we get a mentality in some of these regulatory agencies and these long-term government employees who are out there, you like to think they're doing good work, but when you continue to work to find a business that does not work with them, we should be trying to support them and help them grow. And if there's things they need, whether they're permits or certain forms, that we should be telling them and helping them rather than waiting until after the fact and saying, you didn't comply, we got you, here's a fine. And it totally flies in the face and contradictory to what the governor, who oversees these administrative offices, is saying. Open for business doesn't work if you don't back it up with action. And actions like that and individual actions that I've seen around the state and even in the district at different times contradict that. And until we change that mentality in these administrative offices, we're never going to be truly open for businesses because the businesses aren't going to believe us. And if they got the opportunity to leave, they're going to leave and go someplace where they're more friendly.
I wanted to ask you, as you were talking about that, I got thinking, I wonder if Assemblyman Palmesano deals with this sort of thing in a constituent favor kind of way. Has it ever happened that you've gotten calls from people like this complaining about a government agency?
We get calls on different things. I mean, where we try to be helpful is, if there's like an enforcement type thing and it's kind of into the, an enforcement hearing type of process, we are obviously cannot get involved in the determination of the hearing. Where we try to be helpful, which we get a lot of calls on, Brian, is the red tape and the delays and things of that nature. I mean, we've helped a number of businesses through the liquor authority trying to get their liquor license approved so they can open up their business. And we work with a number of things on the constituent matter, but there's certainly a line that you can't cross, obviously, because you can't get involved in when there's something, especially if it's an adjudication type of process. But those are the things we keep continuing to point out to the governor and to the commissioners at different levels that you have the ability to not be so hardcore and try to just punish people. Why not reach out to them? Have your people reach out and try to help them solve a problem, or if they need additional help, because there are so many regulations. I mean, I've talked to you about this before. In New York State, we have over 49,000 pages of rules and regulations in this state. If you took an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and held it side by side, it would stretch 4.4 miles or 76 football fields. And like I said, our small business owners, our farmers, whoever it may be, have to spend more time doing paperwork than growing their business, growing their place, and instead of growing their business and investing in their business and creating jobs, they spend more time on costly, burdensome paperwork, and that doesn't help us improve our image as being a friendly business climate for people to start a business or keep their business or grow their business.
We're talking with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano, and when we get back, we'll talk about that Anti-Safe Act rally that was held in Albany this week. We're back with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano on Top Story here on AM 1480 WLEA. Assemblyman Donald Trump, as you know, because you were there, spoke about the SAFE Act and the laws that Trump says the SAFE Act breaks.
You have so many violations. You have a violation of the New York civil rights law. You know that. The Fourth Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the 15th Amendment. It's all.
The New York civil rights law, I'm guessing Trump was talking about the part of the New York civil rights law that had to do with privacy rights. Second Amendment, of course, the right to bear arms. Most people know that. Fourth Amendment prohibits unconstitutional search and seizures. Fifth Amendment protects Americans from testifying against themselves. 15th Amendment, I think Trump misspoke on that one. That has to do with African Americans' rights. Your take, though, on what Trump said there, Assemblyman Palmesano, about the SAFE Act breaking existing laws?
Well, I mean, in my opinion, the SAFE Act breaks a number of things, but first and foremost is the Second Amendment, a right guaranteed under the Constitution for an individual to protect themselves and their family. It's been upheld in the courts, that individuals, especially in their home, has the right to protect their family. But this just goes back to, unfortunately, when we had tragedies happen up in Webster, New York, and over in Newtown, Connecticut, taking a tragedy, and, I believe probably the governor believes his policies and ideas was about safety, but it wasn't. Brian, all you have to do is look at the statistics. In 2011, there were 769 homicides in the state of New York. 5 of them were with a rifle, and not even all of them were with what you would call an so-called assault rifle. You had more murders with a blunt instrument than you did with a so-called assault rifle. And, the incident up in Webster, I mean, everyone wanted to talk about what kind of gun this individual had, but no one wanted to talk about the fact that this individual killed his grandmother with a hammer. Why was he not in prison or, at a minimum, in a mental health institution? That's what the gun control advocates want to say. It's going to keep the guns out of the hands of criminals, but that's not, in fact, the case, because 90% of the guns used in a crime in New York State are illegally obtained from out of state. So all this law did was infringe upon the rights of law-abiding citizens to protect themselves, their families, and especially in their home. To think that someone could come into your house and you're trying to protect yourself, but you can only keep 7 bullets in a magazine, although the courts have thrown that out, but that's still being appealed by the administration. But to think, the methodology or thinking about this law, that if you're in your house, you can only have 7 bullets, but do you think a criminal breaking your house is going to say, geez, there's a new law that the governor passed, so I can only keep 7 bullets in my gun? No. They're there to break the law. They're there to hurt you, and you need to be able to protect your family and yourself from that type of harm. And, the debate we had on the floor on that issue was just exhaustive, and people thinking I only need 1 gun with 1 bullet, and I'll call 911. But I said, come up to a rural area upstate. You need 1 gun and 1 bullet, and then you're going to call 911 and wait for them. If you're in a rural area like in Steuben County, some of these areas, it'll take 30, 40 minutes before someone from the police department gets there. So it's just an ill-conceived law. It changed 57 different sections of law in a 24-hour period, and in my opinion, does nothing to keep us any safer.
This is Rob Astorino at the rally on the SAFE Act.
Scrap that act. It does nothing to make us safer. Do what we did in Westchester, and that is focus on the real issues of violence and deal with the mental health breakdown in our system. That's where we need to put our focus on, not turning law-abiding citizens into law breakers.
Assemblyman Palmesano.
Well, Mr. Astorino is right on. I mean, this law was passed without any consultation with mental health experts. Even the Veterans Administration, the Federal Veterans Administration, said we're not going to comply with the act because of what it does to our veterans who have actually fought and died and shed blood and were and lost leg and limb to protect those constitutional freedoms which we all enjoy. So I think Mr. Astorino is right on this, and on top of it, I think we should repeal the SAFE Act. As you may know, I actually have a petition on my website, and people are signing up for that. We saw a number of people from the area come up for the rally there earlier in the week. It was good to see people make the trip up, and they're there just to voice their concerns and their frustration with how this law was passed, but most importantly, that they're a strong believer in their Second Amendment rights, and they wanted to make sure that the governor and legislative officials heard them loud and clear. And it was a pretty good attended rally. I think nearly almost 4,000 people, over 3,000 people showed up.
I've heard different numbers on that, Assemblyman. Some of the media outlets reported 3,500. Assemblyman Nojay said on his show that he heard from troopers that it was between 6,000 and 8,000. Whatever the number is, there's a lot of people that were there. And I saw them. They were all up over the steps and around. And there was a big crowd there. And that happened with the reports the last time. We know we had well over 10,000 people at that rally a year ago, and they were trying to say there was under 10,000, and we know it was more. So, but seeing there the energy, people are concerned, people are still mad. This issue isn't going to go away. This issue is definitely not going away, especially as you come upon April 15th, which is a new law to register these
so-called assault weapons, assault rifles, and it's just in my opinion, it was politics rather than keeping people safe, and because it does nothing to keep guns out of the hands of criminals, it just strictly infringes the rights of law-abiding citizens, and I'm opposed to it. That's why I opposed the bill when it came before me. That's why I'm co-sponsoring legislation to repeal the SAFE Act, the so-called SAFE Act, and I actually have a petition on my website that people can go to sign on to let the governor and other legislators know that they're supportive of Second Amendment rights and against this burdensome act.
Another topic that was touched on during the anti-SAFE Act rally was the New York State economy. Here's Astorino on that.
We are losing as a state. We are losing our citizens at an alarming measure to other states. And why are they going? They're going because the taxes are way too high. The jobs are not here. We have the most corruption.
Assemblyman.
Again, Mr. Astorino understands it because, you can't be 49th and 50th in business climate forever. You have to, and you see too much stuff going on in government where people don't trust their elected officials, and unfortunately they paint us all with the same broad brush. We all get painted with the same brush, and we need to, the one thing we need to do is turn this economy around so we can encourage private sector investment back in our economy. The only way we're going to, get that extra money for our schools and our local programs is when we start having surpluses and not deficits. When we start getting people who want to take that risk and invest capital, and because they want to, they truly believe we are open for business and make that investment so we can create jobs and turn this economy around. We have a long way to go. Listen, I've given credit where I think some things have done. I think some of the parts of the budget were positive. When you think about tax cuts for manufacturers and for businesses, and then you think about the estate tax relief for our farmers and our family-owned businesses who get caught up in that, to raise that threshold up to the federal level is a positive thing. But it's certainly not a panacea. It's certainly not going to change our position overnight. We have a long way to go, and we need to actually look to try to even be bolder in our tax relief so we can encourage that type of private sector investment in our economy so we can create jobs so our young people will want to stay here in New York and stay here in upstate New York because there's a job and an opportunity for them to raise a family and stay here rather than go south to states like North Carolina and Florida or even Pennsylvania, whereas all you have to do is go over that line and you're paying lower income taxes, property taxes, workers' comp costs, energy costs. It doesn't matter. So we need to be more competitive and we need to be more bold in some of our policy decisions. So although I'm kind of encouraged by some of the things in the budget that we did this year, it's certainly not enough to turn this thing around, and we have to looking to do more, continually looking to do more, because I don't want to just go from 50th to 49th or 49th to 48th. We need to make big jumps. We need to show the business community that we're going to take the steps necessary so they will want to invest their hard-earned dollars or encourage that private sector investment back in this economy so we can create jobs here in upstate New York.
Assemblyman Palmesano, with what you just said there and keeping in mind of what Astorino said before that in the soundbite, it's being reported in Moody's, this came out Friday, that Moody's Investors is praising the New York State budget, saying that the spending plan is credit positive, and they praise the governor for keeping a cap on spending and getting it approved on time and increasing school aid. Your thoughts on that review from Moody's?
Well, I think that's obviously I'd rather have positive news about our state budget and economy than negative news, and we have. And I've given the governor credit. He has tried to hold the line on spending, overall spending, the past 4 years. And listen, we have 4 on-time budgets. We've kind of maintained the line on spending. We disagree on certain priorities, whether they're policy or spending in some cases, or if we should do more or less in certain areas. But from a spending perspective, those first 2 budgets, we had $10 billion budget deficits, $3.5 billion budget deficits, and we actually reduced spending from the previous year, back-to-back years. That was the first time that's ever been done in, I think, over 30 years. And we continue to, have a cap on the state spending that we're putting in the budget. So I think we need to be doing those types of things. Those are types of things that help us, control our spending. But I think also, that's why we were able to do some tax relief. But I think we also have to look at tax relief from a bigger picture. That's going to help us spur economic development and investment in our economy, and that's why I think we need to look and wait for ways to be even bolder in that approach. Again, I was supportive of those types of proposals. I think they're steps in the right direction, but ultimately we need to turn this economy around significantly if we're going to continue to improve. Listen, I came in, we came in a very tough situation, and to be able to control the spending way we have working together, that's a positive thing. But we're not out of the woods yet. We have a long way to go if we're going to, have jobs here for our young people to stay here, have jobs here, or have more private sector investments. So our small businesses who have been struggling and dealing with the high taxes and regulations can, make more investments. So maybe they not only keep their businesses here, but they'll grow here and create more jobs here. So we have a long way to go, and I'll work with anyone who wants to go in that direction. And we battle it out on the policy end, you battle it out on the budget end, but hopefully we're working together, moving the state in the right direction. And I think we send mixed messages to the business community, and we need to be more definitive in some of those actions.
Assemblyman, thank you very much for coming on this weekend.
My pleasure, Brian.
I'm Brian O'Neill. Thanks for listening. InfoTracks coming up next here on AM 1480 WLEA. WLEA. WLEA.